And it is a weekend where I get to see the best team in its sport. The team that has galvanized the city and a community and has everybody locked in to find out what they can do. Is this the year? Can they take the next step? For that matter, everybody has that opportunity to see that. And I'm not talking about the Colts taking on the Bengals, and I'm not necessarily a fan of this team at all in any way, shape, or form, but going to Milwaukee for IndyCar and going to the Brewers game tomorrow night, so at least I'll get to see tomorrow night a team that, you know, we'll see what happens in terms of their postseason and what they're able to do and whether or not they're able to hold on and win their division. That is totally irrelevant, I realize, but when I simply heard working for the weekend, I was thinking about what my weekend involves. I certainly hope that all of you are set for a big one and one that you will be able to enjoy, relax, and get set now as we wind down the preseason and turn focus towards the regular season of the National Football League. Good afternoon to you. My name is Jake Query. Eddie Garrison taking the day off today. As a result, Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, is filling in. And we've got a lot to talk about and discuss today. As a matter of fact, we have a lot to get to. We still have an open space in our fantasy league, Query and Company League, and the draft that's going to be taking place on Monday the 25th. That's going to be that's this coming Monday. Chicago's Pizza in Greenwood. And you heard me talk about Chicago's Pizza, how much I love Chicago's Pizza. So that alone is going to be awesome. At 7 o'clock, though, we will be in the conference room there with those who have made it so far into the fantasy league. We have one spot left. We'll do that somewhere around the 1 o'clock hour. Also, high school football getting underway. Kyle Neddenripp will join us on the show to discuss exactly that. James Boyd going to join us 2 o'clock today. And, of course, it is a Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. And we have a story that goes back to a place that I lived when I was a kid in Shelbyville, Indiana. And that how it participates or partakes or contributes to our feel-good story. We will do that coming up in the 2 o'clock hour. But let's begin with what is obviously the big story. And that is the fact that the Colts are set for preseason game number 3 against the Cincinnati Bengals. And it's so funny because I'm still old enough to remember when there were 4 preseason games. And I'm trying to think, I believe back in the day, back in my day, when there were 4 preseason games, that preseason game number 3 was the one where all of your starters played. I think that's right. And then number 4 was the game that it was essentially you were getting everybody out there to go through the motions and maybe a special teams roster spot was still open and somebody could play for that. But for the most part, you had a pretty good idea of who and where you were. What we know for this game number 3, and Ben Baby's going to join us from Cincinnati coming up in just about 25 minutes, and we will get the Bengals' perspective on this and see where they're coming from, because there are some interesting things going on with the Bengals as well. And there have been players on the Bengals roster that people have thought would be natural fits for Indianapolis. But we're going to find out exactly, you know, who we will or won't see for the Bengals, what their approach to this is. But we know that Riley Leonard is going to be the starting quarterback in this game. And we know that Jason Bean will then finish it out. And probably, I think we can safely say Riley Leonard is going to get that number 3 spot. And then Bean, you know, you find out what happens with the practice squad. But I was driving in today, and I'm driving down Capitol, and I'm thinking about all this. If you've ever noticed, there is a theme when it comes to the start of the show that I confess to the fact that I start thinking about the show when I'm driving in on Capitol. But I'm driving down Capitol, and I'm thinking about this as I'm thinking about and getting in the mode of the show. And there is a little bit of, when you do a sports talk radio show, look, our job is not hard. It's not. And we are very fortunate. Myself, Kevin, James, Jeff, John, we're all very fortunate to do what we do. And we're appreciative of those that facilitate for that to happen. But you do have to kind of get in a mode. And you got to kind of, I don't like sit and slap myself in the face to get ready for the shows, but you got to have an energy. You got to get going. You got to start kind of psychologically getting yourself there. And today, as I was doing that, I'm driving down Capitol, and I'm getting ready for it, and I'm getting in the mode, and I'm thinking about the show. And I really, I'll be honest with you, I was thinking to myself, what are we going to talk about today? What is today? I mean, yes, I know the Fever are back in action. I know that, obviously, the NFL, as I just talked about, college football is basically a week away. I knew the topics, but I really was fascinated continuing still with this situation with the Colts quarterback, and not to bore you folks with the point of, okay, Daniel Jones and what's the ceiling, what's the floor, those sorts of things, but rather, as I'm driving and I'm thinking about it and I'm setting up in my mind and I'm getting myself prepared, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm 5 minutes from work, I'm 4 minutes from work, and then all of a sudden it happens. It happens where I'm driving down Capitol, and I get to that point where there's construction and 3 lanes becomes 1, and they're building a building, and there's a guy on a scissor lift, and he's trying to move this thing across Capitol the wrong direction, and another guy has the little stop sign and then the slow sign, and nobody can figure out what lane exactly we're supposed to be going in because this guy on the scissor lift is now having to get off of it and look at it, and everything's fractured, and everything's interrupted, and there's no flow, and I have no idea what lane I'm supposed to be in, and I have no idea how long it's going to take me to get into work. And then I thought to myself, that must be what it has felt like to be Anthony Richardson. Because Anthony Richardson, seemingly, sometimes his fault, sometimes not, but seemingly Anthony Richardson, each and every time he started to get footing underneath him, something happens. Maybe it's that he's injured. Maybe it's that he throws an interception. Maybe it's that he gets tired and takes himself out of a game. But something happens, seemingly, each and every time Anthony Richardson starts to get a feel about him, right? And that's when it dawned on me. That's when it dawned on me. I started hearing Shane Steichen in my head. I started hearing in my head Shane Steichen talking about Anthony Richardson, and even going back and realizing it's like the movie The Sixth Sense. Spoiler alert if you've not seen it over the last 3 decades. But at the end of the movie The Sixth Sense, and if you haven't seen the movie, I won't totally give out what it is. If you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But it's a movie that has a surprise ending and a shock that comes to you. And then it shows this little montage. And in the montage, it shows you all of the points in the movie where it should have been obvious to you what it is now revealing as the finality. And you go, oh my gosh. I saw it all along. And that's when it dawned on me about Anthony Richardson when I heard Shane Steichen's voice in my head. For example, now that Anthony Richardson knows that he's not only not going to play against Cincinnati, but theoretically is not going to get on the field unless something happens to Daniel Jones over the course of the regular season, my question for Shane Steichen is, what exactly is Anthony Richardson now supposed to do that will help him grow as a football player, whether it be for the Colts or elsewhere?
Yeah, I think part of that is just trusting the process of saying, hey, I'm still developing and I'm growing and I got to attack this thing the right way because I never know when my number's going to get called. And I think that's all part of it. And, you're going to go through ups and downs and adversity throughout your career, and how you handle it really speaks about the true character of who you are as a person. And I think he's only, growing in those areas.
Okay. Which leads me to question number 2. And that is, if Shane, if this is about developing and it's about the next steps, you've already said that you've made your decision and Daniel Jones is the guy, and therefore Anthony Richardson is not somebody who you plan on putting out there even in spot roles unless it's in a by-need basis. So if that is the case, my question is, how is Anthony Richardson supposed to go through that development if he's not actually taking reps on the field?
Well, I think you still got to get the mental reps in the meeting, day in and day out. I think that's part of the development. And then when you are on the scout team, I think you can still work on your fundamentals and your technique and going through it and going after the defense, on the scout team. I think that's all part of it.
Okay. Listen to the first thing he said there. Play this again, Atticus. Listen to the first thing that is said there. The very first thing he says in terms of where Anthony Richardson can better himself.
Well, I think you still got to get the mental reps in the meeting,
Boom,
day in and day out.
Right there. I think you've still got to get the mental reps in the meeting. And then I went back to thinking about in terms of where exactly Shane Steichen sees the development of Anthony Richardson and where this quarterback battle might have actually been showing itself and previewing itself. And I kept hearing the voice in my head.
AR has made strides in those areas. He's continued to develop and grow as a young player, and I think he'll continue to do that. Daniel's obviously a veteran player that's been around and sat behind Eli Manning and seen it, done the right way, so that's kind of where it's at.
I keep going back to that. In the meeting, done the right way, sat and watched Eli Manning, and that's when it dawned on me. What dawned on me was just like at the end of The Sixth Sense, I sat there and I said to myself, how did we not see it? How did we not see that Shane Steichen has been telling us this forever? The Colts aired Anthony Richardson because he never got the opportunity to sit and watch Eli Manning. He did once he was forced to, and I realize Eli Manning is the starter for the Giants. I'm saying a veteran quarterback. Anthony Richardson was in a situation where from the get-go the Colts just said, here you go, kid. The Ferrari's in the parking lot, and here's the keys. Go. You don't have to take driver's ed. You don't need to take driver's ed. You watch The Fast and the Furious, and so you're ready to go. Go. And then they realized that they had done him wrong. And when they realized they had done him wrong, they tried to tell all of us. And yes, Shane Steichen does believe that they did the things that were necessary once they saw the errors in Anthony Richardson in trying to develop him. And I'm talking about quarterbacks coach Cam Turner. I'm talking about Jim Bob Cooter, the offensive coordinator. He believes that those guys, in fact, were doing the right things to help him along.
Everyone's development's different, you know what I mean? And I think the injury was a big part of it, and then still keeping them engaged, that first year, and then obviously going through the second year was a part of it. And I think the injuries played a factor in it, but also still, I think Cam's done a really good job. I think Jim Bob's done a good job keeping them engaged. And again, I go back to everyone's development's different in this process.
Okay, here's the thing. Keeping him engaged in the process, in the meeting room, the mental reps. The Colts realized their error, I should hope, in the fact that they handed too much to Anthony Richardson too early. And I totally understand why Anthony Richardson, it didn't click for him, because it didn't have to until it was too late. And that's when I realized that Shane Steichen was telling us all along this point. It never mattered in the preseason what he was going to do in the games. It didn't matter. Anthony Richardson didn't go out and blow you away in the preseason, but guess what? Neither did Daniel Jones. But it dawned on me when I went back and listened to it, and I was sitting there in that traffic, and I was thinking about the fact that I couldn't get consistency of thought about everything going on and setting myself up for today's show, because each time that I started driving and zoning out a little bit, there was another obstacle that came my way. Some of it was my fault. I chose the wrong lane. Some of it was my fault. I didn't see the guy up with the little stop and slow sign. Some of it wasn't. There was a guy sitting there with a broken down scissor lift in the middle of Capitol. But I couldn't get flow and I couldn't get consistency. And in the case of Anthony Richardson, he's never gotten flow and he's never gotten consistency. And in the beginning of his career in Indianapolis, that was because they handed the keys to him too early and he didn't know. He had no idea. He didn't know the difference of what he didn't know. And so he just went out there and like, okay, well, I'm the guy. And so the things like the mental reps, the development, the preparation, all of those things he didn't have to worry about. They didn't have to become muscle memory conditioning because of the fact that it was already handed to him. Then, once they realized they had erred in that regard, yes, the injuries came into play. And I know that at the time, for example, when the Colts told us that it was not a big deal that Anthony Richardson missed OTA because he was going to be there in camp and they were going to have a legitimate quarterback competition. Were they really? Or had Shane Steichen already made up his mind that the missed time and the injuries were setting him back? And there's a mixed message there too, because then, because of the injuries, then he's having to sit and watch. But at that point, does he know what it is that he's sitting and watching? Because he never got a chance to itemize what it is that it takes to be a quarterback in the NFL, because they just handed him the keys and he was one out of the womb. The Colts failed Anthony Richardson. They failed him. The entire experiment was a failure. The approach was a failure. And at the same time, Anthony Richardson failed the Colts. Because once they finally tried to get it under control, and I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's a dumb guy. I think there are people that are literally choir boy saints and Mensa members that didn't work out as a quarterback in the National Football League because it is the most cerebral position and important position in sports. So to not grasp the intricacies of being an NFL quarterback is in no way, shape, or form an indictment of one's intelligence or lack thereof in any way. Nor does it mean that you're selfish because you're not in meeting rooms at the time you're supposed to be, especially when in the early years where you are trying to set trend, you didn't have to do that because they handed it to you. So they failed Anthony Richardson in that regard because they didn't push him early enough. But then once they realized he needed to be pushed, he failed them, and it's obvious. And the movie is obvious, and the plot was obvious. And it was obvious in retrospect that this quarterback competition had absolutely zilch, zero, nada, nothing to do with what took place on the field in this preseason, because what they wanted to see out of Anthony Richardson, what they were evaluating out of Anthony Richardson, what they were hoping for out of Anthony Richardson, and what they were imploring to Anthony Richardson to do were the things that we don't see because they're inside those meetings. It is clear now. Shane Steichen, when you go back and you know the way that the movie ends, and then you go back and you look at the montage over the course of the movie, you go, how in the world did I not see it? And we started to see it towards the end. Kevin Bowen talked about it. Look, don't rule out Daniel Jones. Stephen Holder talked about it. Look, don't rule out Daniel Jones. And I flip-flopped like a goldfish. When I said at first it's going to be Richardson, then I said, you know what? I think Jones might actually be in play here. And then I thought, no, it's going to have to be Richardson because there's more upside there and there's nothing to be gained by Jones per se. And they failed Anthony Richardson. They just flat out did. And eventually, the guy got his little scissor lift off of Capitol, and then traffic began moving once again. But it moved at a slower rate and more methodically than I anticipated when I began my drive. Pete has thoughts on the Colts. 239-1070 is the telephone number. Pete, what's happening?
Hey, Jake. Just what we've never heard about is his Anthony Richardson's approach to this. Is he putting in the work that he's supposed to put in? Is he putting in both the mental work and the physical work? Nobody's ever written or talked about that, really. Where is he in all this?
Well, but I think they have. I think Shane Steichen has. I don't think, Pete. Here's the thing. Let me ask you this, Pete. Is Pete still there, or did Pete hang? Okay, Pete's gone. Have you ever tried to sell a car? If you've ever tried to sell a car and you know that your car has a transmission that's starting to slip, and you say to yourself, you know what, I think it's time for a new car. It's got 80,000 miles on it. The transmission's starting to go. I don't know for a fact the transmission's starting to go, but I've taken it to the mechanic enough to know that this car is just, it's kind of always given me just a little bit of a fit. So I'm going to sell it. And when you put the ad in, I would say the one ads, but obviously in today's day and age, when you put it online or wherever you put the ad for the car, you put it on there and you basically say, fabulous car, great ride, be the envy of your friends, beautiful color, maintained like no tomorrow at every 3,000 miles. Because you want to still get the most that you can get on the trade-in for your car. And when it comes to Anthony Richardson, the Colts still, they've hinted about it. And we can read the tea leaves now to know that they're saying to us, we are doing everything we can to get this guy for the light bulb to go on and for him to get it. But they've stopped shy of coming out and saying, look, the guy doesn't get it. He shows up for meetings late. He doesn't pay attention. He doesn't listen to what we're telling him. Because if they do that, guess what? You are admitting in the one ad that the transmission has gone away and there's no coming back. And I don't know that they necessarily are totally at that point with Richardson. But it's in their best interest to keep people guessing a little bit. Because we'll see exactly what it is that they hope to gain in this relationship. We don't know what it is that they hope to gain. Does that mean that they're hoping to parlay that into picks? Does Chris Ballard even get that opportunity? Because if in fact, if Daniel Jones goes out and is your starter for 17 games and the Colts go 9-8 and they eke out a wild card and they get beat by 23 on the road to open the postseason in Baltimore, is Chris Ballard entrusted by Carly Ursay-Gordon to make the proper changes to find the long-term quarterback? They have a decent roster, and Ballard gets credit for that. But there are so many questions in regard to that. It's impossible to know, right? It's literally impossible to know. Brian, what's going on, Brian?
The Colts are at fault. I can't blame Anthony Richardson. You got a 20-year-old kid that played 12 games in college. When they had Flacco, they should have just started Flacco, told him, look, you're going to be his mentor. Anthony, you learn everything you need to know about being a quarterback in the NFL. Instead of rushing him, what did they expect and where's the guys that, I thought they had talent evaluators or guys with people that evaluate somebody's maturity and everything. Where were these guys at that I heard they spend all this money on? Why didn't they see that it's a young kid? He's 20 years old. He's played 12 games. What do you expect?
I don't disagree at all, Brian. And the thing that's interesting is the scout that was the most supportive of the Anthony Richardson move is no longer with the franchise, number one. And number two, it's interesting when you mentioned that about Flacco, Brian, and I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. I mean, my gosh, we've seen 12 quarterbacks in the last 5 years, so I might be getting them confused. But if I'm not mistaken, didn't Flacco essentially insinuate that grooming him was not his job? That he was here to play quarterback, but being a mentor was not his job? And if that's the case, Brian, if that was Flacco's stance or opinion on it, then they did a poor job in evaluating what veteran quarterback they should go out and get in that situation. Because they should have gone out to get a quarterback that was open. There are guys, Mark Rippon. Mark Rippon came in here as a veteran that had been in the Super Bowl when Peyton Manning was a young player, and Mark Rippon, everybody and their brother knew that Mark Rippon was brought in for one reason and one reason only, and that was to assist Peyton Manning. And Mark Rippon knew it. Mark Rippon absolutely knew it. He knew exactly why he was here. And I'm not picking on Flacco at all, but I'm saying if there was any insinuation from Flacco that, hey, I don't want to be, teacher here. I'm here to play quarterback. Then they should have gone with another guy. And look no further than the fact of the Manning Luck situation. Because everybody and their brother now retroactively looks back and says they should have just drafted Andrew Luck and kept Peyton Manning and handed off the torch after a year or two to see what was left with Manning in his neck and to give that proper opportunity, and they didn't do it. Well, in reality, Manning apparently made it pretty clear, I'm not interested in that. Nothing against Andrew Luck, but I'm here to be the quarterback of the Colts. So they knew precedent in that regard. From Cincinnati's standpoint, what could the Bengals show that is going to be of assistance to Shane Steichen and the Colts? And perhaps, is there anybody in Cincinnati that might help Indianapolis this season? Ben Baby is with ESPN. He covers the Bengals. He joins us next. We are efforting, that's a radio term, and a television term as well, Ben Baby from ESPN. But you never know, in Cincinnati, things might have popped up. So we'll see if we can get a hold of Ben Baby and get him on the program here. Colts and Bengals coming up. That is tomorrow, preseason game number 3. On a side note, yesterday, and I kind of blame Eddie for this, but we were discussing, and I'm trying to think of what it was we were talking about. And Eddie said we are already into, and I can't remember what it was. He was asking, and yesterday we discussed this, is this a save-your-job season for the Colts? Is this a season where, for Chris Ballard, for Shane Steichen, hell, for that matter, Anthony Richardson, is this a save-your-job, I want to still be living in Indianapolis a year from now season for those individuals? I mean, a lot of people. And I truthfully don't know that we know the answer to that just yet, because we don't know exactly where Carly Ursay-Gordon falls in those things, and we don't have precedent. I mean, that I know that's – I should actually, for this show, for Query and Company, I believe that – I can't remember. You know, Eddie's the president of the company. I should label myself now as simply the president of precedent, because I'm a big believer in precedent and looking at the history with people and what it means in terms of how they will react to situations. And in Jim Irsay's case, we kind of had precedent as to the leash that he gave to people when things didn't work out. And we don't know with Carly Ursay-Gordon what her approach is to that. We don't have the precedent to know that. But when Eddie was talking about whether or not it's that kind of a season, he brought up a different kind of season that I thought was premature. And then in what's known as the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, I noticed it yesterday everywhere, the season that he mentioned. And I will get to all of that in just a minute. But before we go there, let's go to Cincinnati. We're joining us now on the always, and today very busy and available to be sponsored guest line. Ben Baby is a return guest of the program. He covers the Bengals for ESPN.com. Ben, busy time, I realize. Certainly appreciate the time. Let's begin with this, and that is, from Indianapolis' standpoint, you probably are not going to see anybody or very few people that you will regularly see on Sundays. What is the Bengals' approach to this game?
Well, you know, I think that you're just not going to see a whole lot of starters. Zach Taylor said that they're not anticipating those starters to play in that game. So we'll even see if Jake Browning, the backup quarterback, gets some run there. I think you're going to see a lot of Desmond Ridder and Peyton Thorne. But, you know, it seems, you know, the Bengals had a pretty extensive scrimmage yesterday, 51 plays, I believe. So that was essentially their final dress rehearsal for the upcoming season. But, you know, I think a lot of people wondered, should the defense be out there, because they did not look great in these first 2 preseason games.
You know, one of the big storylines in Cincinnati has been the situation clearly with Trey Hendrickson. I mean, when you have a player of that level in capability and talent, and then you know that there is obviously a divide between player and franchise, and seemingly every day the storyline changes. And if in the last 12 hours it has changed again, my apologies. Where do things stand right now?
You know, it's funny. Sometimes, you know, some of that change can be perception. But in reality, it's a lot of it stayed the same over the last, you know, couple weeks or so in terms of, you know, what's going on. And, you know, from Monday night, Trey told our Laura Rutledge that, you know, the sides are in agreement on the length and the total value, which is what we had heard for weeks now. And the same thing still stands, that the guaranteed money is the holdup in terms of that deal. And so can both sides find a middle ground on the guaranteed money? For Trey, that's been the biggest thing the entire time, you know, going back to when he started talking to us in April about it. And we knew even at the end of last season that this was going to be a problem with Trey and getting him under contracts that he likes for this year, because he still has a year left. I think it's going to be up to the Bengals to kind of maybe, you know, continue to change their precedent on guaranteed money for veterans. They just do not like doing it after the first year. And I think for a player like Trey, who's been a 4-time Pro Bowler, an All-Pro, you could argue that if the Bengals say, listen, we're not going to do it for everybody, but if you're at a play at an All-Pro level, it's something we'll do when contracts come up. I think that would be fair. That would allow them to maintain their positioning in negotiating in future years, while also making sure they accommodate their best players. And I think that it's everyone's trying to find a way to move forward and find a solution that works. But right now, I think it's going to take both sides coming to the middle a little bit more.
Ben Baby, our guest from ESPN.com, Bengals beat writer. Ben, Indianapolis is a franchise that has been, albeit pretty peripherally, linked as a possibility of one that would be interested to dance with Trey Hendrickson. But it takes two to tango, obviously, and the Bengals would have to work in that as well. Is that wishful thinking, or do you believe that the Colts are, in fact, an organization that Cincinnati could pick up and make a phone call towards?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do not think the Colts are a player in this. You know, it's funny. My colleague Stephen Holder and I, we talked about this at length and talked to our sources, and I just do not think that the Colts seem like, contrary to what's out there, I do not think that they're a viable option for them. And to be honest with you, yeah, I think it's going to be tough for anybody to really trade for Trey Hendrickson right now. You look at what Trey is looking to make, and it's never been top of market. But, you know, you're looking to get in that, you know, he's looking to get in that, you know, that upper tier range of top edge rushers, which, you know, his production warrants that. I think the age question's a concern. So the team that, you know, trades for him not only has to pay him that amount, but also has to give up the assets for the Bengals for it to make sense to give up an all-pro player. And I think at this stage in the offseason, it's very rare for that to occur. When you look at trades that are happening right now, you're seeing a lot of guys who are maybe on the back end of rosters or maybe expiring contracts that are a much lower value. You know, Jalen Ramsey's probably the most notable trade that happened recently. But then you look at it, Minkah Fitzpatrick was attached to that as well. So, you know, I think that when you look at viable trade partners this late in the offseason, that's a really big ask. But regardless, the Colts being a player in that doesn't seem to make sense at this moment.
Ben, I want to go to, and I appreciate the time, Ben Baby, our guest. When you look at, you know, Joe Burrow is, what would you say, a top 5 quarterback in the NFL, top 3? I mean, you can make the argument he's the most accurate passer. I mean, you know, he's right there in the upper echelon, clearly, right? And yet he is a guy that kind of took college football by storm when he got to LSU, and it was like, where in the world did this come from? And you wondered what it would mean and translate to him as an NFL player. It seemingly did not miss a beat. How much of sitting and learning and being forced to prove himself at Ohio State and then having to go to LSU to even get a second lease do you think still drives Joe Burrow? What kind of a guy does he seem to be outside of what we see on the field?
Yeah, it's funny because I think I learned a lot about him last year when they were 4-8, 5-8, 6-8. It's the same guy every day, and whether it's in the middle of the offseason, it can be after an OTA, and he feels like he didn't have a great performance. He's as pissed off as you will find after a regular season loss. I mean, that guy every day of the year, it seems like after every practice, he wants to go out there and absolutely crush it. Every rep, it's almost like life and death. I think it's funny that Joe Buck last week on the Monday night game, he says, "Go down, Joe, it's August." And I was like, in my mind, I'm like, I don't think Joe understands what that means. It doesn't matter if it's August, March, December, whatever. If he's out there, it's time for him to make a play. I think he only knows one speed. I think that's been a big reason why he's been so successful over the course of his career, had a wonderful high school career. I think that time at Ohio State really tested him because he felt like he was good enough to be on the field and never materialized. And, you know, I'll be honest, that first year at LSU, he wasn't blowing people away. I covered the SEC that year. I covered Joe Burrow's last college loss, 7 overtime loss at A&M when I was in the Dallas Morning News. I don't think anybody watched LSU that year and thought this was a guy who was going to end up lighting the world on fire. I mean, also, we probably in hindsight should have said that Matt Canada should never be an offensive coordinator again. And inexplicably, the Steelers hired him, despite what he did at LSU with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. So I think that there are some factors at play there, but he's a guy that is driven more than anybody you'll find in the locker room. And I know that in the NFL, it's crazy to say this, but that is rare. It's rare to find people who every day are very much committed to being great at their craft. I think that the truly great ones, they understand that at a high level.
And I'm sure you can gather, Ben, the reason I ask it, and I know that you don't cover the Colts, but you and Steven, you know, I know speak fairly regularly and maybe bounce things off one another. Stephen Holder, your colleague. Anthony Richardson kind of was in a similar situation, did not have a lot of starts at Florida, came in and was kind of handed the keys. But for whatever reason, it seems as though, because Burrow would be kind of a good comp. More success in college, obviously, right? But seemingly Burrow I'm assuming is the guy that it feels like is there at like 5 o'clock in the morning and leaves at 8 o'clock at night. I don't know that at all. It just seems that way because there has not been a drop-off of intensity at any point with him. And it feels like that lacks in Richardson, and I wonder if it's because of the fact that Burrow had something denied to him in his career at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make any unfair assumptions on Anthony's work ethic. I've only heard great things about him, and everything I've heard seems to be he wants to be someone who wants to go out and compete at a really high level. I think what's tough is that a lot of times when you have just the undeniable arm talent that Anthony has, I think that throw last year he made week 1 was just incredible. I can't remember if it was week 1 or not, but the one where he just fired a ball 70 yards down the middle. I mean, that is not common. That is not a whole lot of people that can do that. I think what's tough is, and you saw this, that you have to get the reps, and I think it's a mix of both. Joe did learn at Ohio State for 3 years, but then he got 2 years of reps at LSU. And then, if we're going to be honest, he wasn't really lighting the world on fire his rookie year either. And, his sophomore year in the NFL, the defense really is the reason why they had a really good season. Burrow played well in spurts, but I think if you go and look at the numbers, he really didn't come into his own until his 3rd year. And what helped Joe was that he was in a really stable situation. Zach Taylor built everything around Joe. The Bengals built everything around Joe. Hell, the whole city is built around Joe at this point. He had consistency as offensive coordinator, his quarterback coach, and they gave him good receivers as well. It helps when you get your old college teammate who you have a lot of chemistry with to come in, and when you need a play, you can go out and do that. So he was well supported as well, but it wasn't like he came in overnight and looks like and played at an MVP level. In fact, he's had to get a lot better over time. Talking about there was a lot of conversation about Anthony Richardson and that blitz he took in the preseason opener. Joe Burrow had a ton of he had a bunch of free rushers as a rookie. I mean, they came from everywhere, and over the years, guess what? They don't come as often, and it comes with reps. And so I think for Anthony, getting those reps would have been helpful, would have been beneficial. Unfortunately, he's had a lot of injury problems. And by the way, you have a front office and a coaching staff that's consistently trying to prove that they belong and that they should, keep their jobs essentially. And I think that makes, the timelines for these quarterbacks to get the reps, it shortens that a little bit.
Ben Baby, ESPN.com is where you can read his work. Of course, you see him on the network as well, covering the Cincinnati Bengals. Ben, appreciate the time as always, man.
Yeah, thank you all.
All right, Ben Baby joining us on the program. Interesting stuff, especially when you consider, Joe Burrow and just, the high level that he is playing. And that goes to show how big that is when you get a franchise quarterback at that level and what it means for, of course, having Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, that clearly helps as well. No question about that. All right, when we come back, what it was that Eddie spoke into existence, and it kind of irritated me yesterday. We will get into that, and coming up in the 1 o'clock hour, we are going to give away our last spot within the Fantasy League as well on a Friday edition, Query & Company on the Fan. about whether or not this is a save your job season for the Colts. And by the way, Kyle Neddenrip coming up 40 minutes from now, a little high school football chat. James Boyd, 2 o'clock. But when we were discussing that, Eddie said, and let me ask you this, Nathaniel, don't call me Atticus Finch, okay? From a marketing standpoint, and I'm talking about when you go through the store, I mean, back in the days when they were still around, and I still, like the fashion mall's still around or, whatever. How many different periods in the yearly calendar are there that are themes for stores? Like merchandising and retail themes we'll start at the beginning of the year, okay? So on January 1, give me what's the next big event on the calendar that stores are centered around?
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's Day is probably correct, right? So you got Valentine's Day. So that goes obviously into then February 15th, you get the 50% off candy sale. Everybody's happy. What's the next thing that all of a sudden you start to see stuff popping up in the store?
Is that Easter that we hit next?
I think you could maybe say St. Patrick's Day.
Okay.
A couple of, you might see one little section of green stuff or, the promotion of a green beer or something. But for the most part, yes, Easter would absolutely be, the Easter candy and et cetera. Okay. So you got Easter. And then, and this is a bit of a tricky curveball here, Easter is done. And then on that Monday, you get into what? So now you're into, now in Indianapolis, you're on the heels of the month. You're right on the precipice of the month of May. But we're going to take out any sort of checkered flag stuff. From a national standpoint, what's the next thing on the calendar?
Summer and then 4th of July, but that might be a little too far.
So 4th of July, which means all of a sudden now, everywhere you turn, there are fireworks stores popping up, right?
Oh, yeah.
These temporary pop-up fireworks stores. So you got your fireworks. Now, as soon as the 4th of July is over with, then you kind of hit this lull, right? This weird period where everybody's just outside and there's no big thing. But then what becomes the next thing?
They have Halloween stuff out right now.
Okay. Yes.
Stupid.
Yes, this is my point. So yesterday, Eddie makes the mistake of mentioning the fact that we're right around the corner from pumpkin spice season.
Oh, yeah.
I go, no, and I know that this is the lamest topic ever because it's become almost a joke, but I'm like, no. I'm telling you, the pumpkin spice thing is a thing for sure, but usually you start getting into, at the very least, you're within sniffing distance of the Covered Bridge Festival, which I think is September, right? Yesterday, I had to go pick up my 6 prescriptions. It's big pharma. But I have what's called the cardiac cocktail. And might I add, do we have the breaking news sounder by any chance?
We will in a second.
Do we, just out of curiosity, might I add, do we happen to have the breaking news sounder? There we go. This was breaking news 30 seconds ago. No. So the breaking news is that yesterday I found out that, and I'm the only person that cares about this, but I think I mentioned it once yesterday, I'm taken off of one of my medications. One of my heart meds I've graduated from.
Go.
Thank you very much. I've graduated from one of my medications. So that's 2 of them now that I'm no longer on, and I'm very thankful for that. But I went to go pick them up, and I'm in the store, and I turn around and look, and I am surrounded by and absorbed by pumpkin spice mania. I mean, there was an entire, literally at the end of every aisle was a different pumpkin spice something. And then just as I was jumping at this, as I thought, whoa, and I made a jump, I turned around, and right behind me was Halloween candy, right? What in the world is going on? We're not even in September. We're accelerating everything. Kids went back to school at Easter, right? Literally from summer. We just keep moving everything further and further back. And I blame Eddie for it. Eddie is the culprit.
I can get down with that. Yeah.
Eddie is the culprit. There was something else, actually, that happened in terms of weird marketing stuff that made big news. I'll mention that in a minute, but we need to get back into the Colts conversation, and we need to as well You're giving me a hand gesture, Nathaniel.
It's a little 30 seconds. 3-0. You got some time.
Gotcha. Okay. We will get into the 1 o'clock hour. We have the last spot to give away for our fantasy league draft, and we will do exactly that coming up in just a couple of minutes. But you have to be willing and able to be at the Greenwood Chicago's. Who is not willing to be at the Greenwood Chicago's Pizza? Because Chicago's Pizza is fabulous. Don't even get me started on how awesome their lunch buffet is and their dedication to community and a story told in every slice. But 7 o'clock Monday night, we're going to have our draft. We will give away the last spot, and we will do it in just about 15 minutes from right now. We'll come back into the Colts conversation and the quarterback saga, if you will, even though it's resolved, but is it? I'll explain next. So we were discussing the quarterback situation for the Colts, and the question becomes, for example, what happens if Jason Bean comes out and absolutely outplays Riley Leonard? Or what happens if Riley Leonard goes out and has an unbelievable performance both in the air and the ground? Do you then say, you know what? We've seen everything we need to see out of Anthony Richardson, and Riley Leonard's our backup, and Anthony Richardson, we're putting a sign in the front yard, make an offer. I don't think that's going to be the case, but you never know, right? You simply never know. And Jason Bean is intriguing because, and look, under no stretch of the imagination am I pretending that we're talking about quarterbacks that are going to get significant reps this season. And if they do, at that point, it's Katie bar the door. But he is a guy that you can tell that they've had a little bit of intrigue of just kind of his unpredictability in a good way at the quarterback position, Jason Bean, because he's athletic and he kind of bops around and he just has a moxie about him that you like, but I don't know that it's a moxie that necessarily translates into the NFL. But the Colts have clearly gone back and extended that invitation of continuing to get more looks from him, practice squad guy. And Riley Leonard, I think there are a lot of people that think, hey, is Riley Leonard somebody that, you know what, when we talk about if Richardson, if they've turned that page and if Daniel Jones just kind of holds water for you, is the next guy that they took a long, hard look at right there on the roster. And he's somebody that they, maybe tomorrow goes a long way in that. It's entirely possible. But I want to play for you something that indicates and maybe tips the hand a little bit on where the Colts are in terms of their kind of understanding of the Anthony Richardson situation. But before I do so, we'll squeeze in a couple calls. Mo from Ohio. Mo, what's going on?
Not a whole lot, Jake. In a classroom, got a conference period as I'm subbing here. So
you're subbing. Now, what subject are we teaching today, Mo?
Well, we got math today, but I was a retired history teacher, so it's kind of out of my element. But it's all right.
Well, I will tell you this. My history of math sucks. So, I mean.
Yeah, I follow that.
I'm 50-50 on that. Okay, your thoughts on – because, Mo, I realize you're a longtime Colts fan. You make the drive each and every home game from Ohio. Your thoughts now going into the season with this last preseason game being in your home state?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the Daniel Jones AR. I don't know. I'll go with either one because I'm a fan. But my concern is that the head coach, GM, the organization up front is not up front with the fans a lot. There's a lot of talking in circles, and it's kind of funny. You had a commercial about 5 minutes ago that talked about honesty and integrity, and I don't see that with a head coach, GM, and I don't know who's at blame of that. I know there's certain things that in the NFL you don't want to let out of the bag and stuff like that, but I think that's kind of some of the root of the whole problem with fans being in the state that they are, is we're always guessing. We're always in the dark. The head coach can't explain realistically healthy why decisions are made. And I know you can't do that as an organization all the time, but sometimes just to put the fan base to calm down, if you just talk to them and look them in the eye a little bit and then follow through with the things that you say, I think it would go a long way, and I don't see that. Right
Mo, it makes me wonder this, okay? Do you think it's possible that Shane Steichen has been speaking in cryptic tongue, especially when it comes to the quarterback situation, because of the delicacy of the fact that it was very aware to Shane Steichen, who is a quarterback whisperer, at a very young period of the career of Anthony Richardson, that he didn't have it?
Yes, I agree with that.
I mean, I think that. You know what I mean? And again, and Mo, I appreciate the call. I want to be sure that people understand. In no way, shape, or form am I saying that is any sort of an indictment on the – I have no reason to believe that Anthony Richardson is other than a nice young guy. And I'm pulling for the guy. I am. And I don't – when I see him, I see at times very intriguing things. But Steichen has made it very clear that this seemingly goes above and beyond what we are seeing on the field. and that this is stuff that is an indictment on what's taking place. Again, I go back to listen to and we're going to hear from Cam Turner in just a second, who is the quarterback's coach, who has worked with Anthony Richardson more than anybody else on a one-on-one basis probably. But listen to Shane Steichen from what we talked about earlier, okay, in terms of Anthony Richardson and how he can develop without actually going out and taking snaps. Because when you look at it, you go, okay, he's only had so many starts. And each time that he starts to get footing underneath him, it falls backwards because of an injury or other such things. So this is Shane Steichen talking about how Anthony Richardson can develop and continue to grow without being on the field.
Well, I think you still got to get the mental reps in the meeting, day in and day out. I think that's part of the development. And then when you are on the scout team, I think you can still work on your fundamentals and your technique and going through it and going after the defense, on the scout team. I think that's all part of it.
Mental reps in the meeting. We're in year 3. We're in year 3, and basically what that is the head coach saying, we're hoping that he still figures out the mental reps in the meeting in year 3. Now, I remember one of the first jobs I ever had as an adult. I worked at the cigar store, best job ever, with all due respect to this one. Loved it. Loved everything about Hardwick's Pipe and Tobacco. It was the best. It was the absolute best. And I still maintain that I could commit a horrific crime and be doing a perp walk in the orange suit on the 11 o'clock news, and people will look at it and immediately go, that's a cigar guy. Because I sold cigars for 8 years in Broad Ripple, and I loved every single minute of it. But I digress. In that capacity, I had a guy that owned a business in town that said, you know what? Do you want to make a little bit more money and come work for my company? And I said, yeah. And I had no qualification at all, but I had raw talent. I was charismatic, so he told me. I was outgoing and could talk to people because when I was in the cigar store, I did, trivia for a Tootsie Pop and other such things. And he's like, I think you can come work for my company and do really well. And I went in there, and I kind of didn't know what my role was. I just knew that I appreciated that he believed in what I could bring to the table. But he got kind of distracted in doing other things within the company itself and within the business. And I just kind of sat there every day like, I don't know what it is that I'm supposed to do. And I showed up every day at the time. I mean, it was an 8 to 5 job, and I got there at like 7:50 every day. And I stayed till 5 and just kind of went through the motions. And I was there because I had a lot of the raw things they were looking for, but in terms of the true understanding of what the job entailed and what was expected of me, I never really understood what my job was, and I never really understood what they were wanting me to develop into. And one day he came to me and said, you know what? I don't like your work ethic at all because you come in and you just sit and go through the motions. And I remember at the time being like, but you haven't shown me what the motions are supposed to be. But what I now know as an adult who's been through some professional things is that it was my job to understand and figure out what it was that was expected. It was my job to take the abilities that I had that allowed me the opportunity to be inside that office and parlay them and grow them into what it was and mold it into what it was that they wanted me to be. And I never grasped that marriage of what they saw in me and then what it was that I was supposed to then see beyond that. And I think there's an element of that with Anthony Richardson. I think part of that's being 21, 22 years old, 23 years old, which is what I was in that situation. I was wide-eyed and naive, and I think that you have exactly that. Which takes us to Cam Turner, the quarterback's coach of the Colts, when he was asked about, and primarily by James Boyd, who's going to join us at 2 o'clock. These are great questions. Cam Turner, who comes from a football family and comes from a family of, Ron Turner and Norv Turner. I mean, great football minds. But Cam Turner, a young guy, has worked with quarterbacks before. And when he was working and was assigned specifically to Anthony Richardson, and yet Richardson apparently was me at that ad agency of just like, I'm not sure. I know I appreciate that. I think I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, but what more are you wanting me to do? Cam Turner talked about that exact dynamic when it comes to Anthony Richardson.
As a position coach, you want to see your guys succeed and be successful naturally. And, I feel like I've tried everything I can do, and I feel like he's given great effort in that aspect too. And I don't think either way it's one or the other. I just think, right now it's not where the consistency is just not where we wanted it to be.
I tried everything I can do.
Pretty funny.
Listen, when Bob came to me at that ad agency and said, look, what you are doing here is not what we need. At least he didn't say this to me. I've tried everything I can do. That's not a great endorsement. I've tried everything I can do. When I hear that, I'm thinking, I've tried everything I can do? Really? That ain't good.
Sounds like he's given up. Like, I've tried, I'm done.
It does. That's exactly what that sounds like. That's exactly what that sounds like. I've tried everything I can do. Listen, I do auto racing play-by-play for a living in addition to this. And I see times where there's a car that everybody knows is an unbelievable car. In the Indy 500. It's the fastest out there. It's great in qualifying. Everything about it's perfect. And then the car comes in. For some reason during the race, it's just not going well. I remember Jimmy Vasser, I was in the pits for 2 years. And Jimmy Vasser one time had a car. It was Miller Lite was the sponsor. And they brought it in, and I was there, and I'm like, what's going on with this car? Because it was Rahal Letterman, and they had a good car and a good team, and Vassar's climbing out of the car, and they said to me, you know what, there's something, a gremlin within that engine, and we've tried everything we can do. We brought him in for several pit stops, and we tried everything we could do. And then finally they just said, this car just doesn't have it. And that's exactly what that sounds like. We've tried everything we can do. Speaking of Speedway, Matt's there, 239-1070, not at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but that area of town. Thoughts on Turner? What's up, Matt?
Hey, I just find it interesting that I don't think they have to cut bait with this guy. I mean, you've got him under contract this year, next year, and you can pick up his option the year after, and he'll still only be 24, 25 years old. I think they've made the right decision for this year. And I kind of get the frustration with Turner. He's worked with two other quarterbacks, Cam Newton and Kyler Murray. And if he's kind of thinking those guys were both pretty successful. I think he's probably in a fair place to say, I've done. I think the question probably caught him off guard. I think he's probably safe to say that over a beer in a restaurant. He probably shouldn't have said it the way he did.
Matt, here's what's interesting in that. What's interesting in that is in Cam Turner answering the question about the professional naivete of Anthony Richardson, Cam Turner indirectly showed a professional naivete of Cam Turner.
100%.
And that's, again, not an indictment on either one of them being a bad guy, but just a naivete there, right? Appreciate the call, Matt. By the way, Matt, do you know anybody over there at the baseball program at Speedway High School?
So I am your food and beverage director, and your Christmas lights guy.
That's right. That's right.
I'm the.
And by the way, just so you know, by my calendar, based on the fact that yesterday I saw pumpkin spice stuff everywhere, we are 2 weeks away from Christmas lights becoming back in vogue on the calendar. So you're cool with that. So go ahead.
I'm the acting president of the Speedway Athletic Booster Club also.
Really?
So, yes, I do know some people in the athletic department.
Do they still have those sweet Astro-looking brown and yellow mustard yellow jerseys?
I'm friends with the AD. I can check on that. I know they've gotten some new uniforms in the last couple of years, so there may be something that you talking about the Astros looking one or the
baseball jerseys, the ones that they're brown and yellow. They look like the old Astro sunset jersey. I'll pay top dollar for one. I just want to walk around.
Do.
I want to walk around like at the Grand Canyon with one of those things and have people be like, "That looks just like the sunset behind you." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know. It's a Speedway High School spark plugs. I'll pay top dollar."
I do have a request for you, if possible.
Okay.
This is kind of off topic. So, Mr. Boyd, I was following on Twitter, and I like his work. There was a guy a while back that was getting a little heated with him.
You caught a stray on a block, didn't you? He did a group block, and you caught a stray on it.
Tell him to look for IndyCar Man and put him back on.
Okay, hold on. So you're at IndyCar Man on the X Post Twitter, is that right?
I am.
Okay, I'm gonna lock this in here because that happened to me with Reggie Miller. Somebody used profanity in a tweet that I was on with Reggie Miller, and Reggie Miller has me blocked on Twitter, which the one interesting thing about that is I think it's the first block of his career. But nonetheless, I'm blocked from Reggie Miller. So we will get that in, Matt, and I will do everything I can. Speaking of blocks, we're not blocking anybody from our fantasy football league. Our fantasy football league, we have one spot remaining. And we are going to do our draft at 7 o'clock on Monday evening from the Greenwood Chicago's Pizza. And I will allow Nathaniel, since he is filling in for Eddie today, to make the executive decision right here. Nathaniel, are we doing this in terms of show trivia to have someone have to prove their loyalty to this program and that they're not just a passerby, or are we doing Colts trivia for this? Either
show
one.
Trivia, 100%.
Okay, show trivia. Now, Nathaniel doesn't listen to the show, so he is not necessarily capable of coming up with a question. But I'll come up with one off the top of my head, but we've got to do it at 239-1070 right now. At 239-1070, if you would like to be the last participant in our fantasy football league. Now, we do know that the fantasy league, I believe the season tournament championship, if we want to call it that, the season championship for the fantasy league will involve some pizzas from Chicago's, but you're going to get that anyway at the draft, which is going to take place 7 o'clock at the Greenwood Chicago's Pizza. And keep in mind, Chicago's Pizza is the very best because you get the top quality of cheese. You get whether it be the traditional pizza, a deep dish pizza, they have a thin and crispy pizza, they have a gluten-free pizza, they have the deep dish and the traditional both that are right there for the offering for you on their lunch buffet between 11:30 and 1 o'clock. You get that and a salad bar and a beverage for just $13 out the door, a bargain at twice the price. And they have 18 central Indiana locations, 25 of them statewide, but it's Greenwood that will be the epicenter. That's going to be the war room, ground zero, if you will, for our draft. Are we doing this roulette style, Atticus?
I picked a guy. How about we go with Brian here?
Brian, what's going on?
Oh, not much, buddy. How are you guys doing today?
We're good, Brian. You sound like a fun guy, Brian. Are you a fun guy?
I try to be. Old Bub tries to be a fun guy, that's for sure.
Brian, if you don't mind me asking, how old a fella? We're going to do a little get-to-know your listener. We've had a lot of success with this. Kids love this segment, as a matter of fact. How old a fella are you, Brian?
I'm 53.
53-year-old Brian. That would put you in a high school graduating class of 90 or 91, depending on how much confidence your parents had when they enrolled you. Which one?
We are in the class of 91. Not much confidence there, buddy.
91. I love that. Brian, what school was that?
Greenfield Central Cougars.
Greenfield Central Cougars. Okay, I actually know a girl from Greenfield Central, and might I say, appropriately named. Okay, so, Brian, the class of 91, can you tell me, just out of curiosity, who the Mr. Basketball was in our senior year of high school? Because I was in the same class as you.
Man, I probably could if I had enough time to think about it.
What was the top, when you were a senior in high school, what was the top song that you can recall coming out from our senior year?
Coming out from our senior year, do you want like glam metal?
Man,
that's probably where I was.
Listen, I'll tell you what. You had Faith No More, I think, came out in like around spring break of our senior year. Remember that song?
Absolutely do.
In addition to Faith No More, you had More Than Words from Extreme. Every girl loved that. That was around prom time, right? And then if you remember the fall of our senior year of high school, Brian, there was about a 3-week window where CNC Music Factory was everywhere you turned around. Remember that?
That Pump Up the Jam? Is that what we're talking about?
I believe, Pump Up the Jam was Technotronic. I believe that I Want to Sex You Up from Color Me Bad was also huge.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, Brian, how often do you listen to this program? And be honest, because I'm going to catch you in a web of lies if you're lying to me.
No, I'm gonna be honest. I try to listen every day. It's not for the whole show. I own a landscaping company, so I'm in and out of my truck all day. But
Oh, that's
I
cool.
try to listen every day, and
Okay.
I have for years.
Okay.
And I kind of don't feel. I feel a little different than you, to be honest with you. I don't know where the Colts have failed Anthony Richardson. I mean, they put everything in front of him that the man could ever want to get better.
I don't disagree with that, Brian. I think the one area, when I say they failed him, and it's not, I think they gave him too much too early. You know what I mean? Like,
I do agree with that.
That's what I mean by that. They didn't make him earn it until it was too late to make him earn it. Because
there was no competition. He was the man.
Correct.
He was going to be the man. So.
Not unlike the two of us in 1991, right?
Yeah, not like that at all. Not at all.
All right, Brian, you've proven yourself pretty solid so far, right? You've proven yourself pretty solid so far, but I'm still going to give you a show trivia question. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, this particular question Eddie came up with, and it's a pretty good one. We have a baseball bet, and the baseball bet is that Eddie, myself, and then a listener each pick two teams. And whoever has the highest win total at the end of the Major League Baseball season with their two teams wins a six-pack of beer from the other two. Can you tell me any of the 6 teams that are involved in our baseball bet?
Any of one of them is the San Diego Padres. Am I correct there?
You want a second opportunity? How about this? I took off about 2 weeks ago. I missed a show in the middle of the week because I went to go see this baseball team. And they're not good.
Oh. The Reds?
Okay.
Yikes.
Brian, I'm
probably failing. I am failing you. I know I am. I'm completely dropping the ball.
That's okay. All right, Brian, I'm going to give you one last one, and then we're going to move on from this laborious experiment. Here we go, Brian. I asked this to somebody the other day on the show, and then I had a migraine for 3 days because I hit my head against the desk so hard. You ready? Which sports team in Indianapolis do I, on a personal level, attend the most games as a fan? Which Indianapolis sports team do I attend the most games as a fan?
It was nice talking to you guys, and thanks for the opportunity. And I appreciate you, but I'm going to say, I'm just guessing it's the Fuel.
Oh, man, Brian. Now, I do like the Fuel, and I go to like 2 Fuel games a year. Brian, you're a good sport, and because you're the class of 91, we're going to put you in. Can you be there on Monday night at the Chicago's Pizza in Greenwood?
Absolutely.
Okay. When you're there, I will let you know that it is 41 times a year in the regular season that I go to see the Indiana Pacers play, which is the safest pick anyway because they play the most home games of anybody. But, Brian, you are in. So, Brian rounds out our fantasy football league in the Query and Company League because Brian sounds like a fun dude. So we will see you at the Chicago's Pizza and have a lot of fun with that. Kyle Neddenrip, by the way, covering high school football. It is hard to believe that high school football season is upon us, but it is. And Greenfield Central, perhaps one of those schools that you could keep an eye on. And those, every year I ask Neddenrip the same question, and that is by the way, do you think Brian's ever actually listened to the program? Or do you think he just right then?
I mean, he says every day. That's kind of tough to believe with what he just said. But I believe him in and out of the truck.
He did have, leading up to it, he said, hey, you're wrong in the fact that you failed. So he was at least listening earlier today. So
that's all we could really ask for.
Correct. That's all we can ask for. Nonetheless, so Kyle Neddenrip, high school football. We will talk about some of the teams to watch. And as I always ask him, there's always a team each year that I pick that's one that maybe doesn't have everything going for it, doesn't have the resources, but they've been playing hard, and they're hoping to turn things around. And then I got on board with that team for the year. It was Shelbyville a couple of years ago. I believe I did Edinburgh one year. Shortridge, I believe, was last year. I'll ask Neddenrip that as well. But who is the team in the area that is the one to watch, and what matchups jump out off the page to begin the year? We will get into that and more with Kyle Neddenrip, and we'll do it next. July to preview the next week's high school football season getting underway, right?
That doesn't it? It always seems like we start the season earlier and earlier. It's really not the case, I would think, but it does seem that way.
Okay, let's begin with this. I think that we oftentimes think of just the same cast of characters, and I mean that in a good way, when it comes to high school football powers. But one of the things that is fascinating is if you really look, historically speaking, at the trends of dominant athletic programs, it really can show you the migration patterns of a city and the expansion of a city. And I think you know what I mean by that. You know what I mean? I mean, Westfield 20 years ago was a small school. Now it's a power. Same with Hamilton Southeastern or Fishers. It seems like we're starting to grow that way westward and seeing better schools there. But give me a school. This is year what for you? 16 on the beat? 17?
I think 18.
Okay, 18. Sorry to sell you short. Yeah. So give me a school or two this year that looks to be a power that when you first arrived in the Indianapolis market, you were hardly mentioning them because they were so small.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And that's something that, when I was doing these previews this year, it's like, man, when did Westfield become, I mean, you almost kind of write them in as a sectional champion every year and a potential state contender every year, where you weren't really thinking that way, even 5-6 years ago, even as good as they were, and they were getting a lot better as a 5A program, but then to make the jump, to 6A has been, pretty dramatic, to be a 6A power. And now you see Brownsburg winning it last year. Definitely the suburban Indianapolis area teams have gotten, where it used to be at the top of the top, it was the township schools, Carmel, Center Grove, that were the dominant forces. Now those suburban HCC teams are more, in that conversation. Shoot, the championship last year was Westfield Brownsburg. So, I don't know that they're. I mean, I would say, I don't know. It's hard in 6A because there's limited numbers of schools you can really look at that way. Each of those schools have kind of had their ups and downs at different times. I think definitely. Probably this year it's kind of the same team, the Brownsburg, Westfield. I think Avon's going to be really good. I don't know if they're a state contender, but I think they're getting a lot better. But, we were talking about them 10 years ago. They were really good, under Mark Bless. So, maybe that's not a good example. But there are, to your point, that is definitely happening. And now, for sure when we see teams like Westfield making it multiple times, Brownsburg making it multiple times, and now you look at Carmel and they're trying to get back to that, where you never thought that, even 5 years ago that they would be climbing back, or having to climb back. They're kind of a team that you wouldn't see them as an underdog necessarily, but they're kind of in that role going into this year in Kevin Wright's first year as coach. So that's been an interesting change, to your point. I don't have a great answer for your question, but it is a good point.
How about this, Kyle? Kyle Neddenriep, our guest. Before we get into specifics in terms of games or matchups that are going to be intriguing early on, let's get to this, and that is teams that are indeed playing at a different class this year, either that moved up or went back down again than a year ago. Who is reacclimating to a new class this year?
Yeah, and this is a change that I'd say made to to make these changes annually. It's still a 2-year, so for instance, Cathedral moved back down to 5A from 6A. That'll be for the next 2 years at least, depending on what happens. But so they're making these changes annually based on the previous 2-year period. But if you make that move like Cathedral this year, then you're staying there for 2 years at least. So you're not the specific school won't change annually, but they will make changes annually. So that said, probably the biggest ones, Cathedral I mentioned, 6A to 5A. Taking their place is Decatur Central. They basically just swapped spots as far as Decatur moving into their old sectional in 6A with the Lawrence North, LC, and North Central. Decatur was the 5A champion last year, and then in 5A, New Pal moves up. So now New Pal and Cathedral are in the same sectional, one moving up, one moving down. So you can kind of set your schedule. That's going to be a great game whenever that happens down the road. and Plainfield is a top 10 team too in that same sectional. So New Pal moves up. They were the 4A champion last year, and also a big one is Heritage Hills, which was the 3A champion last year, now in 4A, and they will be, I think, really a state contender for sure in 4A as well. So those are I think that may be it for this cycle, but we'll see more, coming next cycle as well. With there'll be a classification change as well for next year as far as the reshuffling of sectionals and whatnot.
Kyle, for those that are unfamiliar, Kyle Nedrip is our guest from the Indianapolis Star talking about high school football. The requirements, I'm using that in air quotes, what it is that takes place that causes a team to have to change classes, either moving up or down. I mean, I have a general idea here, but for those that don't know, could you explain why a Cathedral would be a 6A school, goes back down to 5A, or why somebody would be a 5A that goes to 6A, et cetera?
Yeah, you have to accumulate a certain amount of points over a 2-year period. It's 6 points, and that's based off, 4 for a state champion, 3 for a semi-state championship, 2 for a regional, and then 1 for a sectional. So, for instance, if you win a state title and then win a regional, you would bump over a 2-year period. You would bump up. That would accumulate 6 points and bump you up to the next classification over, for the next 2-year period. So that's kind of the cycle that it goes on. In Cathedral's case, they're actually a 4A team in football by enrollment size, but they've been playing up because they keep accumulating. And now if you're up, playing in a in a higher class, and you accumulate. I think they moved it back to 3 points now. So if you accumulate 3 points over that 2-year period that you're up, you stay in that class for the next cycle as well. So that's why Cathedral bumped back down. They didn't accumulate that amount of points, so now they'll be in 5A for this 2-year period. So it's been, I think, overall, I think it's the success factor has worked to its, to why it was put in place. It's kind of affected the programs that have won a lot at one level. And, I know there's every system like this has its flaws. Different states do it different ways, but I think it's served a purpose for the good of, at least for high school football. I think you could probably argue other sports are maybe different, but I think this has been pretty good overall for football.
3 best teams, at least on paper, heading into the season in the Indianapolis area, go.
I would say Center Grove, Brownsburg, and New Pal and Westfield. Those, I'll give you 4. I think because those New Pal's in 5A, those other 3 are 6A. But I would say those, 3, 4.
3 most intriguing in terms of from a year ago they showed flash or perhaps disappointment, and you are the most intrigued by the enigma of what they could be this year. Either way,
for sure, Carmel. Like I mentioned, they're coming back.
Kevin Wright back in the helm, right?
Yeah. And then I would say Decatur Central for sure, moving up to 6A, see if they have the depth to compete. And then the team they're playing tonight also, I think Avon will be, from an intrigue standpoint. I'm curious how that game goes tonight with those two playing each other.
Best players in the area?
I would say, gosh, now I need to I'd say J.J. Finch at Warren Central for sure, defensive end going to Alabama. And then, you think about the skill position players. Gosh, I know I'm going to end up leaving people out. Monsoon Sales from Lawrence North at receiver, definitely a fun player to watch. He's only a junior, has a ton of offers on the table. And then Jace Brewer from Franklin Central too is another. Those might not be the 3. I'm not looking at my Mr. Football preview stuff here, but those 3, Brewer's got a lot of offers. I mean, he just got offered by USC this week. He's also a junior, and just a really physical specimen type player. So, those are a few.
Kyle, I've always felt like Kyle Nedrip is our guest from the Indianapolis Star, and maybe this isn't the case now. You give me your thoughts on it, but I have mentioned before 100 times, I'll make it 101. when I worked in local television, and it's been since, the Colts Super Bowl year when I worked in television. But when I did work in television, the one thing when I moved from television to radio that I miss, was I loved Friday night football. When we would take the helicopter, nobody takes the helicopter out anymore, I realize, but when we would take the helicopter out, or I would go out on a Friday night, especially in the late fall, and go to 2 different high school games and get some video and get a couple of highlights and put them together. And I would go to all these communities, Kyle, all around central Indiana, and the crowds were just massive. And I mean this as no disrespect to the love of basketball in this state, but for as much talk as there is about Hoosier hysteria, I think you could make the argument that Hoosier hysteria now is almost more a Friday Night Lights thing, because it seems like high school football packs in the crowds in the communities even more so than basketball. Am I totally off base?
Not at all. And I think there's different reasons for that. And I do think, Hoosier hysteria still exists. It's just not, you're going to find it, more in the tournament, and you can't, the Jeffersonville championship game against Fishers last year, or the Kokomo game the year before that, was like those games were incredible. The fans were incredible. The environment's incredible. But I think football's kind of set up. You start the school year, week 1, the students are excited to be there. Everything builds up during the week. It's one time a week, so everybody knows where to be on Friday night. All that sort of plays into it. And I think that's, that helps football a lot because of the nature of that. And I feel that myself, even years removed from when I was playing football. It still feels like, this time of year, it's so fun to come back and get the season started, and everybody's looking forward to it. So, but yeah, I wouldn't argue that point. Definitely from a community standpoint, and also just the number of people involved on a football team. You just have a lot more families, the band parents, there's just a lot more overall number of people involved on a Friday night football game than there would be in basketball, just because of the sheer number of that. But yeah, I would not argue that. I think it's in part because of the timing of the school year, like I said, but also just the community aspect and the once a week nature of it. And then, if you're winning, you're going to keep building that throughout the course of the year. And, some places will have their best gate tonight, I'm sure, and it won't be that way the rest of the season. But, you can't tell me if you go to the HSC Fishers game in a couple weeks and it's an insane atmosphere. And there's other games like that, but it's those nights are special, just to kind of take all that in and see what that's like. But like I said, there's other games like that, but that one comes to mind, especially based on what you just talked about.
Okay, last thing, Kyle. I do this every year, and I put you on the spot every year. I always try to pick one school, and this school I'll try to, over the course of the season, especially when we talk, bring them up, give the kids some love. But I always like to try to find one team that, whether it be that they're underfunded, maybe their enrollment went down, maybe they've had just not a lot of success at all in the last, cycle of the group that's there now enrolled, but that you look at and you go, this is like the Disney movie here, because God love these guys. They're out there working every single day, and they're just not getting perhaps the success or the love that people get at other schools. But, they deserve some props for the effort and for the diligence and for the everyday grind. Give me 3 schools, and I'll pick one of the 3, and I'm on board with them, and I'm bandwagoning them this year.
Okay, well, I'll say, as you mentioned that, Washington Continentals, I know they've got Ramon Stallings there as coach, and they have had some success here recently. Maybe not the success we kind of quantify as state championship type stuff, but I think they would be one. Scott Hicks, the AD over there, and I know they're trying to build that program up, and Stallings in his first year coaching there, but he's been there in the building, so they would be one to come to mind. I know Christmas Addicts has a really good running back, Darrell Taylor, who's the last 2 years I think is over 3,500 yards rushing. So he's just an exciting player, really good. People, the opponents who played against him know, like, he's the real deal. It'll be fun to track what he does over the course of the season. And then I would say Crystal House, which is Manuel's they play in Manuel's old building, old stadium there, Ray Schultz Field, and they're a school that's coming back from didn't finish the season out last year, so I know they're kind of rebuilding. But I think those maybe start with those three.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head Crystal House's like mascot nickname? I mean,
Yeah, they're the Eagles now.
I'm all in on the Eagles, baby. I'm all in on the Eagles. I played at Eastwood. We were undefeated 2 years in a row. Beastwood Eagles, baby. We called ourselves Beastwood because we were the Eastwood Eagles, but they're nothing but beasts at Crystal House. I'm all in. Fly high Eagles, baby. Fly Eagles fly. There we go. Brush up each time you're on with me, Kyle, on Crystal House. That's who we're talking up this year.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, appreciate it. Kyle Neddenriep, Indianapolis Star. Appreciate the time. Enjoy the games tonight. We've got to get to some texts that came in, including some actually this time that said that I'm a smart guy. Yesterday I was a dumb guy. I'd rather head into the weekend with some intellect. But we did talk about Anthony Richardson, Shane Steichen, some interesting stuff to break down with that. We'll do it with James Boyd, but I'll also read some text next. James Boyd, 10 minutes. Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday coming up bottom of the hour. Hope you're excited for a big weekend. Milwaukee IndyCar this weekend. I will be heading up later today. I do love the city of Milwaukee. Oddly enough, and I have to be one of the few that this is the case, but we go to Milwaukee every year in December for a weekend. And believe it or not, every single time we've done so, it's been like 45 degrees. The only thing that's the biggest buzzkill and the most underappreciated aspect of where we live, maybe I'm the only one that notices weird things like this, but growing up my entire life in Indianapolis, I just took for granted, I never realized the connection of where you are geographically within your time zone and how it affects the times of the sunset. I know that makes me an idiot, but I never knew any different because I lived in Indianapolis, and so like in the summertime it got dark. You know, obviously then we went to daylight saving or whatever, but like it would get dark at 9 or 10 o'clock at night. It was like, okay, great. And then I moved to St. Louis, which is on the far eastern end of its time zone as opposed to western end. And like in the winter, it got dark at, 4:45. I'm like, what is going on here? And the same thing in Milwaukee. We went up last year and it was like 7 o'clock, and Shannon and I both are like, I feel like it's midnight. We were up there the night that the Pacers and Lakers were playing in the in-season tournament championship. And literally by the time the game came around, I felt like I was those people that you hear about like in Europe that watch the games at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then when I went to the concert in Manchester, England, a month ago, that is so far north. The concert ended at 10:30 and it was sunset. It was very strange. A couple of texts to get to. We talked earlier about the Anthony Richardson situation. You can always text the show at 239-1070. Forever, we would allow people, I would, enjoy and encourage people to text me on my personal phone as well. You can do both. But the text line at 239-1070, in talking about Anthony Richardson, hey, Jake, Anthony Richardson is done in this city. It's time for the March for Arch. Listen, we've gone over that, though, with the Arch Manning situation. I get it. I understand the sympathy. It reminds me of the year that LeBron James was getting ready to his rookie contract, or the contract in Cleveland when his free agency was coming up, the year of the decision. And about 2 years before that, every franchise in the NBA, people were like, they're actually shedding salary, because what they're doing is they're gonna get like a bunch of salary cap space for LeBron James. Everyone thought they were the one that was going to reinvent the wheel on LeBron James and getting LeBron James. And yes, with Arch Manning, there's probably more fascination with that in Indianapolis than most markets for the obvious reason. But number one, we still have yet to see Arch Manning. I mean, by all account, he is going to be a phenomenal player, okay? But we have yet to see Arch Manning and what he can do with consistency at the high level, although one would think every single aspect, all signs point towards domination, yes. But the Colts would not be the only franchise that's like, we should get sneaky and try to get Arch Manning. And then secondly, I've mentioned this before, and this is a whole different talk show, but I don't think there's a guarantee that that the Manning family would say, yeah, let's go play in Indianapolis. There's precedent. Eli Manning, drafted by San Diego, said, look, he's not signing there. He's not going to do it. And I know that Peyton Manning has love for his time as a Colt, and I know that Peyton Manning has love for Indianapolis, but Peyton Manning now is a Bronco, and Peyton Manning now, let's be real, Peyton Manning now, the only time in Peyton Manning's life that somebody essentially rejected him, it was at the last year of his time with the Colts. And I think he still thinks of that. Hey, Jake, listening to Colts leadership is like listening to politicians. If the mouth is moving, we're getting lip service, a.k.a. deception. I think that's an issue. I don't mean that they're guilty of that, but I think there is an issue in that perception, and that people feel like they can't be trusted. Talking about the Colts. Jake, regarding the Colts, Richardson is done. Ballard should be too. Nothing with Ballard has led to playoff success. Yeah, nothing's really even led to playoffs, right? You got to get there first. James Boyd was one of those that was talking with Cam Turner, the quarterback's coach of the Colts. And we're not only going to talk about that, we are also going to try to see if we can get somebody unblocked from him on the X-Post Twitter. We do it all next. So here's how the week has gone for us. Kind of at the fault of nobody, I realize. So Stephanie White, earlier in the week, we had the situation where Stephanie was supposed to join the program, and I totally get it. I mean, the Fever have had, and they're back in action tonight. But the Fever have had just a roller coaster ride when it comes to health and injuries and availability of players. And Stephanie White was totally apologetic where she's like, oh my gosh, and I don't remember what day it was, they all start to run together, where she was to join the program and then got pulled into a meeting. And then I think we had to kind of float her for the second time that she came back on, but we ended up getting that done, and it was a good conversation yesterday. Fever back in action tonight, taking on Minnesota, the best team in the league in the WNBA, and they are going to have to face them 3 of their final 9 games. But there was somebody else this week, and I can't recall who it was, that we were to have on, and something happened at the last second. And now, and I realize he's our colleague, but apparently James Boyd enjoys the trend, right? Is that right? Now, I'm blaming Eddie for this, Nathaniel. Can you let us know what has happened here?
Well, James has given us permission to make fun of him on air. So he says it's his bad. He's not even blaming Eddie here. He says we can make fun of him on air. We have permission.
What I'd like to know is this. IndyCar Man, at IndyCar Man on the Expos Twitter. Apparently James Boyd blocked him.
Maybe that's why he didn't want to join us. Maybe he heard your tease, said, no, I need to run. I can't face the fire.
So I don't know that I have ever blocked anyone on Twitter. There are a couple that certainly it would probably make my life easier. There are a couple of people I think on social media that their entire existence is just to like be combative and argumentative. I mean, that's probably like 90% of them now, but I get it a lot. And there are a couple that just are like constantly after me. And eventually I'm just like, what? I look, because I'll double check and I'm like, but you still follow me. Like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Should I say the names or not say the names? Is it too petty if I say the names? I talk about
why not? It's a
Preston
Friday.
Huh?
It's a Friday. Why not?
I mean, they're kind of fun. I kind of enjoy it. I get a kick out of it. But the one that drives me, the only one that truly bothers me is the guy, and I'm not even going to say his name, but the guy that, because I have talked about, so James Boyd, by the way, unavailable. But because I have talked about, and Nathaniel, I will rope you into this equation, okay? You're even more egregious here than I in the following. One time, I think I literally did this one time. I've probably mentioned it several times since then, but there was one time where I did a full explanation on it, and it was like 15 years ago. But I want someone to call the show right now that is in my age range. And by that, I mean if you are between the ages of, say, 45 would probably be too young. If you are 48 or older and you grew up in Indianapolis, I want you to call in right now because I need to run kind of a test real quick. Before we do that, we'll get to James, who wants to talk about Richardson and Ballard. James, what's up?
Hey, nice to talk to you. I really enjoy the show. It's the first time I've called in.
Is it really?
Yeah, I'm a huge Fever fan.
Okay, that's cool.
And so there's a parallel between the Fever and the Colts this year. I went into the season with the Fever conflicted over something. Now I'm going into the season with the Colts conflicted.
Now, what was with the Fever, what were you conflicted about?
Because I thought Christy Sides did a great job, and she came in before Clark. And to a team that had just won like in single digits for years. And she came in taking on that challenge and did a very excellent job.
I think that's fair. That's a fair point.
And I feel like the people that came in after her, they just kind of ran in to get in the Clark limelight. So I just don't see them as legitimate. So, I had feelings about that.
Okay, that's fair.
And then with the Colts, I really look at Richardson and Ballard as separate situations. With Richardson, he just didn't have enough experience in college to come in and start. That didn't make any sense whatsoever. I can't even imagine Peyton Manning after just 2 years of college coming in and starting in the NFL. It just seemed impossible. So I think Richardson did well given under the circumstances, and that to say that he's a wash or he's a bust is silly because he really just doesn't have enough experience to even make a determination like that.
I think, James, the thing that's tough is just the fact that I don't disagree with you, and I think fundamentally you make good points. The challenge is this, James. It's not that Richardson's a bust. It's the fact that if you want to say, and I don't mean you, James, I just mean people in general, if the narrative is that Richardson needs more time under center before we can make an evaluation on him, did James drop off? Then the thing is, a lot of the denial of those reps are the fault of Richardson. Not necessarily, it's not his fault he got hurt, obviously, but the inconsistency when he is out there, this is year 3 now. I mean, at some point you've got to say, like, okay, even if it's Jonathan Benner and it's not his fault, at some point you reach a point where you have to make the determination of this just isn't going to happen. And it seems as though the Colts have made that determination based on things that we can't see. You know what I mean? Based on the things that we can't see. Before we get to Simon, who is within the age range I was looking for, I'm going to get to Calvin. Calvin, what's up?
Hey, buddy. I have a question about the Colts and the quarterback situation. Why don't we try a 2-quarterback set? Never has there been an opportunity for 2 similar guys to play the same position, whether on the field at the same time or in the same drive. The playbook is almost perfect for both of them. I don't get it. Ask the Colts quarterback coach when you talk to him, will you?
Calvin, I think I can tell you what the answer is. By the way, you sound like a nice guy, Calvin. Have you called the program before?
No, I just try to do what I can do to be good, man.
You sound like a friendly fellow. Like you sound like you'd be the perfect next-door neighbor.
Well, yeah, perhaps. I've just had a small business my whole life, so that's what it is.
How old a fellow are you, Calvin?
I am 50 years old.
50 with a 50? 50, okay,
yes, sir.
So actually, Calvin, so you and Simon, I'm going to do both of you here real quick, and then I'm going to answer your quarterback question. But let me ask you this real quick, Calvin. Did you grow up in Indianapolis?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When you were a kid, have you been a sports fan your whole life?
Probably since my late teens.
Okay, so late teens, you probably were. So you would have been in like the 4th grade when the Colts moved here from Baltimore, correct?
Yes, in the middle of the night.
Okay, that's right. So you weren't up, were you? Because it was a school night, right?
I don't know. We were probably pretty excited.
So what I was going to ask you is, Calvin, were you a football fan before the Colts got here?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I believe
fair.
the Cowboys was the thing for the NFL for me at that point.
Okay. Exactly. Okay, the Dallas Cowboys. And I appreciate the call, Calvin. Bottom line is this on the quarterback situation. I get what you're saying, and it is unique because they play a similar style, so theoretically you wouldn't have to deviate from the playbook or expect the rest of the roster to do things differently, have a different approach, use different lineups from one quarterback to the next. But I just think the quarterback position itself is a rhythm position. And as they always say, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And that has become probably the most unwritten rule of football, where if you don't just pick one guy and go with it, it just historically has never worked. And I've seen collegiately, whatever else, I've seen teams that have tried to do it, and it just seemingly never works. Simon. All right, Simon says is going to be my true litmus here. We just got into it with Calvin just a little bit. But, Simon, you said you are 54 years old, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
From Avon.
From Avon. 54-year-old Simon from Avon. Okay, so, Simon, when you were, and I'm going to guess that you graduated from Avon High School somewhere around 88 or 89, am I right?
89.
Okay. So we're going to go back, and I need you to just close your eyes real quick, Simon, unless you're driving, and please don't do that, okay? But I want you to envision 3rd grade Simon, okay? 3rd grade Simon. And one of the prerequisites for this experiment was that you were a sports fan as a kid. So when you were living in Avon in, say, 1981, 82, 83, in that era, were you a sports fan?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I'm going to guess that you, Simon, or perhaps your friends, maybe a cousin, an older brother, whatever it might be, somebody you knew had one of the following. They either had an NFL lunchbox, they either had the NFL bedspread and or sleeping bag from Sears that had all of the logos on it, or they had one of the Sears and Roebuck NFL either like letter jacket or sideline coats, or the little ball on top snow hat in the wintertime that was bought at Sears for one of the NFL teams in the era of young 81, 82, 83 Simon. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So in that capacity, Simon, I want to know this. We're going to go back in time right now, and we are going to talk to 1982 Simon, which would have been, if my math is correct, you would have been, what, 12 years old, 11 or 12 years old?
11, yeah.
Okay.
11, 12, yeah.
Your favorite team at that point. The NFL was on Sundays and one game on Monday, and you got maybe 2 or 3 games each week that you got to see. But your favorite team, Simon, and listen, I'm not even Kreskin here, okay? But I'm going to guess within 5 what you, and don't tell me what it is. Did you have a favorite team at that time, Simon? Don't tell me what it is, but did you have a favorite team?
Yes.
Okay. Your favorite team was one of the following. The Dallas Cowboys, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. And your best friend, who was your best friend back in those days, Simon?
John.
John. And if John was not a Cowboys fan, John was probably a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers, or possibly the Green Bay Packers or Oakland Raiders. And then if John simply went by what he saw on television, he was a fan of the Bengals or Bears, even though both were terrible.
Dallas Cowboys as well.
Okay. Did you have any friends that were a fan of any of those that I just mentioned, and the Washington Redskins would be the only other possible outlier?
My brother was a huge Packers fan.
Okay, and I bet it's because the Packers, at somewhere, some way, he either as a kid played on a team that was the Packers, or your mom got him like a Packers hat at Sears when he was a kid.
Ooh, that's good. Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I also had a friend that was a Jets fan, and he played on the Jets as a Little League popular player.
Or he watched the Brady Bunch once and saw Joe Namath and thought it was cool that he showed up at Bobby's house. Here's my point. There is a guy on social media. Pittsburgh Steelers were my team, Simon. I was a diehard Steelers fan. Okay. Because the Colts were not only in Baltimore at that time, but they were a total afterthought. I mean, the 1982 Baltimore Colts were literally the Arizona Cardinals, or I mean, they were the Colorado Rockies of the NFL, right? You never heard about them.
Didn't even really know they existed.
100% correct. As a matter of fact, I had a Mean Joe Green poster, and he was getting ready to sack Burt Jones, and the old Sports Illustrated posters. You remember those that just at the top had the name of the player and then the photo? You probably had Tony Dorsett or maybe Roger Staubach, right? Yeah.
In Farrah Fawcett, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Now let's talk about that, shall we? I mean, can we get into Lonnie Anderson and Cheryl Teague also? I mean, here's the thing, Simon. Let's be honest. You were skulking the back areas of Spencer Gifts, weren't you? Looking through the poster.
Absolutely.
That's okay. All right, so
Jeans
Simon.
Jeans West and Spencer's right next to each other.
Yes. Yeah, you got it. Head over to Hot Sam's. I got a pizza pretzel with you. All right, so Simon, I appreciate you participating in my little game. There is a guy on social media that has, since the beginning of time, I mentioned this exact scenario. And I was a Pittsburgh Steelers fan because my dad worked in the steel business. And in those days, the areas that Simon and I just went over are the exact reason why you picked your favorite team. And I was a Steelers fan. Now, I'm going to bring in Dan on this same, Dan and Nick real quick. So we'll go with Dan first. Dan's 48 years old. Dan, did you grow up in Indianapolis?
Well, I'm a little more than 48. Jake, but yes, I did grow up in Indianapolis.
Okay.
Basically lived here or in the environment my entire life.
Okay, so when you were a young kid, 10, 11, like the peak years of sports fandom when you're first getting into it, who was your team?
The Oakland Raiders.
Okay. And
I love Ken Stabler.
Okay. So, and in addition to that, did you at any point, I mean, the silver and black in general was totally awesome, right? Ken Stabler with, I mean, obviously you had the miracle play and the left-handed throw and all that and the kind of the gambling man looking deal. But did your mom or dad or anybody like for a birthday or anything else get you like a Raiders hat or a Raiders jacket or any of that?
They did get me a Raiders jacket once.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how old were you when the Colts moved to town?
Oh gosh, how old would I have been? if it was 1982, I would have been
84.
like a sophomore in college.
Okay. So then how long did it take before you were a Colts fan and you kind of waned off of your Raider fandom, or are you still a Raiders fan?
Oh no, I am a hometown guy. I mean, there's nothing I hate worse than going into a stadium and seeing people like when Larry Bird would come rolling in with the Celtics. Oh, it made me sick.
Okay.
With the Pacers. So
Okay.
I'm a hometown guy, so I immediately switched over.
Okay. So, but Raiders were your team, right? I'm going to go with one more here with Nick. Nick, you are 51 years old. Is that right, Nick?
I am indeed.
Okay. You grew up in Indy?
I did.
Okay. If you recall when the Colts moved here, it was like this long. Remember, I remember in the newspaper, it was like Colts moved on the back burner, then back on the front burner. I mean, it was kind of a yo-yo in the news story for several months leading up to it. And there was discussion that perhaps the Baltimore Colts were going to be moving to Phoenix or to Memphis. There were a couple of cities in play, but they built the RCA Dome, then known as the Hoosier Dome. We went down, we watched it being inflated, we watched the whole deal. At that time, Nick, before Mayor Hudnut came out with Bob Irsay arm in arm at midfield with the Merchants National Bank logo in the background. At that time, you were a fan of what NFL franchise?
The Cleveland Browns.
Okay, that's another good one I should have thought of. And is that because you liked Brownie the Elf, or because, and this is probably the more common theme, your dad or an uncle or somebody you knew was a fan of Jim Brown or was from the area and passed it along to you? What was the origin of your Brown fandom?
My father grew up near the Ohio border,
Okay.
and he grew up before the Bengals were there. And so he grew up a Browns fan as a result of Marion Motley, Otto Graham, and Jim Brown.
Okay. And then you were, since we are roughly the same age, you were how old before you were able to transition psychologically from Brown fandom into Colts fandom?
I maintained my Browns fandom until Cleveland moved to Baltimore.
Okay.
And then I officially got connected with Roger Goodell and the NFL and changed my fandom to the Indianapolis Colts.
Gotcha. Okay. The reason I ask, Nick, and I'm going to keep you on the line to let you be the judge and jury here, the point that I've been trying to make, there is a guy on social media that has literally come after me every 3 to 6 months where he posts a thing that says that I'm a fake, quote unquote, fake hometown hero because I claim to be all about Indianapolis, but I have mentioned the fact that I was a fan of the Pittsburgh Steelers in my childhood. And when they moved here, I nostalgically still felt that kid childhood aspect in it from time to time when I would see the Steeler uniform and was not immediately all in on the Colts because of my Steeler fandom. And the fact that when the Colts moved here, the Steelers were it's kind of like the end of the big red machine that you and I saw. The Steelers were breaking up and you were moving and transitioning into the transition with Bubby Brister at quarterback and Walter Abercrombie and Louis Lips were their offense. And you were kind of holding on to some of the defensive players of the Steel Curtain, but they were starting to wane a little bit. And so it was a slow transition for me before I became all in on the Colts. And it was probably 10 years before I was totally all in just because it was a hard transition for me. And this guy continues to tell me that is wrong and that makes me a fake homer, if you will. And I believe it is my contention that actually is kind of the norm for people of our age range because we had over a decade of fandom before the Colts were here. Your thoughts, Nick, as the judge and jury?
100%, Jake. I'm fully behind you, and you are, if nothing, a homer for Indiana. The only exception to that has nothing to do with National Football League, though. The fact that you're a Clemson fan is never-endingly confusing to me.
Okay, can I explain my Clemson fandom, Nick?
You can do whatever you want. It's your show.
No, it's yours, Nick. It's the company. It's the company that drives this show, Nick. Do you remember Ed Sorensen, Nick?
I do.
Okay, Ed Sorensen.
He had a famous back and forth with his co-host Deion Willis. If
Yes.
I recall correctly.
Clyde Lee and Deion Willis ended up marrying one another. Ed was on the set with them along with Bob McClain. And when I was
Clyde Lee was Ed was the sports guy on that program.
Correct.
Sorry.
When I was in the sixth grade, I called Ed Sorensen on the phone, and I told Ed Sorensen, I said, look, I want to be a sportscaster. And Ed Sorensen said, everybody wants to be a sportscaster, but if you want to come down here and hang out, you can. And I did, and Ed Sorensen from day one basically gave me carte blanche. I was like John Feinstein in A Season on the Brink. I was at the Channel 6 sports office all the time, and I was a diehard IU fan because if you cut me, I bleed the torch. And I loved IU because it said Indiana on the jersey. And I was in the Channel 6 sports office one day. I was midway through college, and Ed said to me, look, man, the one thing you've got to learn is objectivity. You've got to learn objectivity, and you've got to learn impartiality if you want to be a true broadcast journalist. This was a different era, admittedly. And he said, for example, I don't know if you have intention or design of being a sportscaster in Indianapolis, but if you want to begin learning fandom you have for IU and become more impartial in understanding their flaws, their weaknesses, the reasons they lose games, win games, etc. And I said, but I love IU. I mean, that's what I grew up on, and I go to IU. And he said, you know what you should do? Pick a team that likely is in a market you will never cover, and let that be your outlet. Let that be the team that you're all in on. Carry your emotion to that. And I said, okay. And I said, well, I've always liked Clemson because when I was a little kid, we would go on vacation. And when we would go on vacation, my mom would allow us one junk food on vacation. And when I was a kid in South Carolina, we were at Hilton Head, and my mom allowed me one junk food for the week. And the junk food I selected was a six-pack of Clemson orange soda. And it had the paw on it. And I kept the can because Clemson won the national title that year. And I said, so I've always liked Clemson in football. I like Indiana, but they're terrible. But Clemson was the national team I would kind of root for. And the next day, or a week later or whatever, the next time I was in the Channel 6 sports office, Ed Sorensen gave me a Clemson sweatshirt and said, there you go. That's your team. That's who you're. And so I started watching in the sports office games on satellite of Clemson football and seeing the crowds and everything else. And I was 21 at the time, 20, maybe 21. And they were always good enough to keep me interested and not good enough to finally get it done. And years ago, I decided, you know what, enough. I'm going to buy season tickets. And I did. And within like 3 years, they were national champions. And I love going down to games because it's 8 hours away. It's just a good getaway, and it's a great college town. And that explains why I'm a fan of Clemson. But I am Indiana through and through, and as a kid, I lived in Shelbyville, Indiana. And there's a guy living in Shelbyville, Indiana that would like to actually take Shelbyville on the road and do it by getting Indiana in a limelight on a national stage. For that matter, almost an international stage. And it's a topic that we've talked about plenty with Debbie Antonelli when we talk about the fever. And both of those individuals will join me as part of our Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday, and they'll do it next. Is this like an old 45 vinyl that you found version of this song? Sound a little distorted there.
A little
all
weird
of a sudden.
here, isn't it?
What's going on with Huey Lewis? I know Huey Lewis is apparently retiring because he has a hearing problem, if I'm not mistaken. But when you hear that on a Friday, bottom of the hour at 2 o'clock, you know what it means. It means it is time for our Franciscan Health Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. I love telling a story each and every Friday, and I would encourage all of you to submit to me via email, or you all know my cell phone number by now, 317-523-9288. The telephone number, 317-523-9288, is my cell phone. And I love hearing stories of those young people in high school, or whether it be for their school itself or wherever it might be, that are overcoming obstacles, that are overcoming odds, that are doing something that when you watch it, you say to yourself, that's the essence of sport. Yes, we talk about the Colts and the Pacers and the Fever and the upper echelon of sports, but sport is about so much more than that. It's about unifying the masses, and it's about people coming together for a common cause, and sometimes just to elevate the game of somebody that we didn't realize had been working themselves to elevate their game and now is doing so on a big stage for all of us to cheer for. And that includes the story that we're going to talk about today. And before we get to John Wheeler, who comes from an area that I know a little about, Shelbyville, Indiana. I did live in Country Club Heights. I've had many a milkshake at the Compton's Cow Palace. Before we get to John and how he is putting Shelbyville on a big stage, let's bring in Debbie Antonelli, who, of course, we talk with on a regular basis about the Indiana Fever. We have discussed with Debbie the triumphs of her son, Frankie, who is out making his way in the world after going through, a special education and Special Olympics upbringing. Debbie, the reality is this is a friendship and a story that comes because of the fact that somebody thinks they're better at an area of expertise that you say, there are a lot of areas, John, where you're good, but you're not a better free throw shooter, right? And the two of you have now, I think, have a special relationship. Thanks for coming on, and tell me what it is that jumped out at you, Debbie, about this story involving John Wheeler.
Well, I want to thank the commissioner of the Horizon League, Julie Rowe-Lash, for introducing me to John through the Horizon League championships, which are held here in Indianapolis. A basketball championship, I should say. John is a Special Olympic athlete who came out one morning to shoot some free throws with me. Jake, as you know, 24 hours, nothing but net is my free throw shooting marathon for Special Olympics that in 7 years we have been able to raise $1.4 million for Special Olympics. And John is an athlete that I met, and I was drawn to John because he is an absolute winner. Everything about John speaks winning, and he and I became fast friends.
Okay, so let's bring John onto the program. John, you are a part of Team Indiana, and you are getting ready. You have been a part of not only a player in Special Olympics, but coaching as well. But I want to go back to the origin of all of this, and that is when, John, you had adversity come your way in terms of your dream of playing basketball when, and you correct me if I'm wrong, you tried out for the team at Shelbyville High School, and you didn't make the team, but you found out that that didn't have to mean the end of your career. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. One small correction is I'm from the Shelbyville area, but I grew up in Morristown, a small town 20 minutes north of Shelbyville. And that's where I used to play basketball, and that's where I got cut, the Morristown Yellow Jackets.
Okay, sorry about that.
You're good. But apart from that, yeah, so when I got cut from the team, a friend of mine told me about Special Olympics, and now I consider it a blessing that I got cut. Special Olympics changed my life and made me who I am today.
Okay, and with that, you are a champion in Special Olympics, not just because of finding a new way to continue your dream and passion of playing basketball. And I would imagine, John, not a day goes by when you don't sit and think about that game-winning shot that you hit that lifted your team to a championship. Tell me about what it is I'm talking about there.
Oh, man, you're absolutely right. I mean, not a day goes by where I don't think about that shot. Double overtime game against arguably the best team I've ever played against on a national stage. I don't know if it was because of my skill or by God's grace. I'm probably going to go with God's grace since it was a fadeaway jump shot against the double team. But that shot. First, I got to give credit to my teammates. They're the ones who gave me the ball, and they trusted me to make that shot. I'm just happy I could come through for them and for my home state. But that shot, yeah, I think about that shot every single day, and it just reminds me of what Special Olympics has done for me. When I first joined, I didn't believe in myself since I just got cut, but playing in Special Olympics, it gave me confidence in myself that I can overcome anything and overcome any obstacle. And that was just another obstacle. And as I said before, I'm really glad I came through for my team, for myself, and for my home state.
You know, and I want to go back to Debbie. John, hang on just a second. We'll come back to you in just a second, John. But Debbie, let's get to this, because this is what I love about it. And I love the fact that we're going to try to help John continue in pursuing his dream here. But to me, it is so special when you hear John say, here's a young man that hits a shot that wins for the state of Indiana, wins for Indiana a national Special Olympics championship, hits the shot, and yet says, I want to give credit to my teammates for having faith in me in that situation. For John to get to that moment, John had to have faith in himself, but at the same time, the essence of sport is the fact that he recognizes, probably even more so than some of the elite athletes we talk about on a regular basis, he recognizes that it takes the belief from others for you then to ultimately be able to carry. And to me, that is such an important lesson.
And wouldn't you want to help somebody that needs a little extra, someone that would believe in you and would give you some motivation or some resource to be able to help you achieve your dream? The Special Olympics oath is let me win, but if I cannot win, let me be brave in the attempt. When the first thing out of John's mouth is about his teammates and giving credit to them, that speaks to a champion's heart right there. And he is a champion. He's much more than just a winner on the basketball floor. He has won in many aspects of his life because he does have the self-confidence that comes with being able to complete a task, to set a goal, and to achieve. And that's what he's done through Special Olympics. And I'm just grateful that he wants to be my friend because I love having friends like John.
And Debbie, he's a better free throw shooter than you, right? Or is he not?
No way, man. John's got no chance.
All right, let's go back to John. John, here's the bottom line. You know, there was a guy from Indiana named Keith Smart that once hit a national championship shot for Indiana University. And people here were so proud of it, we still talk about it. John, you are like Keith Smart. You hit a national championship shot for the state of Indiana. And now you have the chance to do what Indiana did in 1992, go back to an elite level of national championships in Minneapolis, Minnesota. But tell me about the quest now, John, to continue your career in Special Olympics and what it is in Minnesota that awaits you.
Oh, man. Believe it or not, you're not the first person to ask me that question over the past couple of weeks. I feel like I still have so much more to give to Special Olympics, both on and off the court. I mean, I want to keep playing. I mean, I love basketball. I love being on that court. It's where I'm happiest, especially when I'm beating people in free throw contests, and I've never lost a free throw contest.
That's right.
But also, I also realize that I'm getting up there in age. I mean, I've been playing sports all my life, and I want to continue to help Special Olympics in any way I can, especially my community. So I want to keep playing for as long as I can, but when I go to Minnesota, I want to help the team I'm coaching, assistant coach, however I can, and hopefully we can do what all Indiana teams do, bring home a national championship.
Well, John, let me tell you something.
Yes, sir.
I know you want to win the national championship, John, okay? I get that, and I appreciate that, and everybody in Indiana is pulling for you to do that, okay? But at the same time, I want you during that journey, and you know this, but I want you to think back to that time when, and we all have had this in our life, when you got that word at Morristown that you didn't make the team and you thought it was over, And then you realized that there was still an avenue for you to pursue what it is that is your happy place, playing basketball on the court. And, John, your teammates found you and they got you the ball, and your coaches believed in you to design that play, but you put yourself in that position. And you put yourself in that position, John, because you never lost sight of what that dream was, and you didn't let adversity get in your way. So we're going to do everything we can to make sure that nothing stops you from getting to Minneapolis, okay? And regardless of whether or not you bring home the hardware in the physical sense, certainly know that everybody listening to this show right now knows that John Wheeler is going to be a champion representing the state of Indiana, which brings me back to Debbie Antonelli. And, John, I appreciate it. Debbie, John challenged you in free throws. John challenged Greg Doyle in free throws. Julie Relash saw what John had in free throws and had him there at the Horizon League and made the introduction. But you now have a challenge that I love for the listeners of this show, and John is oh so close in that quest to get to Minnesota. He's like basically at the Wisconsin border, he's so close. But there's a way, Debbie, that you and I can reach out to the listeners of this show to help John reach his goal, and you've got a challenge for people, Debbie. Let me know what that is.
Yeah, Jake, I mean, I'm so proud of John, how hard he works, what he represents for all Special Olympic athletes, that I want to challenge everybody. I'm going to make a minimum of a $100 donation, and then however many threes are made combined between Minnesota and Indiana tonight, I'm going to add another $20 for every three-point basket that is made tonight.
All right.
I'm asking anyone out there that would like to consider helping with a three-point made basket, however many it totals up between Indiana and Minnesota. That's the number that I'm going to donate. And I hope that there's some others out there that would like to get involved and help John on his way to Minneapolis.
So, Debbie, here's what we're going to do. I appreciate it. John has set up a GoFundMe to help him get there because it is expensive to travel. And, you know, to get this team there for Team Indiana, Debbie, it is much appreciated. And I'm going to do two things. Number one, I am going to put up on my social media, that's at Jake Query, Jakequery. Just in a couple of minutes here, I will put up the link where you can make a click and make a donation. Even if it's a $1 donation, it is much appreciated to get John to his goal. He's been working hard to raise money and contribute on his own, but we want to get him across that finish line to make sure that he and his teammates from Indiana have the funding to represent this great state in the Special Olympics, in the national championships in Minnesota. And in addition to that, as always, I give my number out on the air at 317-523-9288. Anybody who has my number in their phone or just heard me say it right there, if you would like the link to make a donation, then I will happily forward that to you. Simply send me a text, and I will get it to you, and we will get John on his way there. John, appreciate it, and Debbie, appreciate it as always. John, we wish you the best of luck, and we know that you're going to do us proud either way, but we're going to get you to Minnesota. It's the kind of story that makes your heart feel good when you think about Debbie Antonelli, her son Frankie, and their commitment to one another and their commitment to Special Olympics. And when you think about your heart feeling good, you want to make sure it feels good, and that's why Franciscan Health in the physical sense is there for you. With the heart scan for just $49, it is the first step towards making sure that you are getting into that proper health from a cardiovascular standpoint. Franciscan Health recommends this for anybody over the age of 40 in particular. If you've got a history of diabetes, obesity, you're a former smoker, or if there is a history of heart disease within your family. Just $49 for a heart scan from Franciscan, and Franciscan is ranked number one, the number one heart program in Indiana for cardiology by Health Grades, number one in Indiana by Care Checks. They want to make sure that you are staying on top of it and becoming preemptive when it comes to your heart health. $49. Again, you can go to franciscanhealth.org/screening bundles or call 833-238-0688. That's 833-238-0688 to get that non-invasive, very easy to do heart scan from Franciscan. Easy for me to say, right? We'll take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll hand it off to John and find out what he's got lined up on the big program next. JMV has arrived. Man, we had a busy show today, and I appreciate everybody calling in, especially those that justified that I'm not an Indianapolis hater because I admitted to being a Steelers fan when I was a kid. John, we were talking about it earlier. I know you and I have talked about this. When you were a kid, you and I have talked about this a lot, actually, but which did you have between the Sears and Roebuck Corporation, the NFL bedspread, bed sheets, sleeping bag, snow hat, sideline coat,
all of it,
or leather jacket?
I had every bit of it. Everything was Bears.
Bears, okay.
Every bit of it.
So you were a Bears fan. Now, is that because
the robe?
The robe, yeah.
I had the robe with the pocket up there.
How about the trash can?
Trash can. I still have the trash can at home.
I do too.
I can get a picture of this too. I was telling everybody I still have the starters jackets from the 80s too. I've got 2 Kansas City Royals, which are awesome.
Yeah, that's
I
good.
look just like the late Dick Hauser in them when I put them on, and an old Bears that look like Ditka. So
yeah, you and I have talked about this, but I think people just forget that in our childhood. So what age were you, John, where you were able to kind of then start really getting into the Colts? Because you were how old when they moved here? You would have been in I'm guessing you would have been 7th grade?
I probably was. It's weird. Once you start doing this, you just try to have to be as balanced as possible. Right. I always say I want people to have enjoyment, and clearly there's nothing enjoyable about this crap. But I want people to have enjoyment, especially when they're out there spending the money. But I was probably a Bears fan up until maybe mid to late 90s, like watching them every weekend and really caring. And
which is about the time that let's be real, the Colts.
Yeah, 1995 season.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't give you a lot of reason to.
Yeah, Eric Kramer being the Bears quarterback may have been kind of it for me right there. That was the swan song of me being a Bears fan. He was the quarterback, and who was the Cedric Benson?
Yeah,
the running
Cedric
back
Benson,
from Texas,
the running back from Texas
was the running back at the time. Curtis Conway was the wide receiver. That was like the last gasp right there.
The the Bears. I'll tell you one of the things that's funny about those Bears teams back in the day, right? It is. Can you imagine today, John, a team coming out with the Super Bowl shuffle 3/4 the way through the regular season, the furor that would create?
Oh, social media.
I mean,
they'd like that.
It's unbelievable.
Every nerd in social media would go crazy.
It is unbelievable that they did do that, though, in hindsight.
You couldn't send it back out or you'd be described as an aggregator or whatever that is. What do the nerds say, aggregator?
Aggregator,
You know
you're right. Yeah.
All the dorks. You nerds come up with some funny stuff.
Because I will say the Super Bowl shuffle was pretty awesome, right?
Well, hell yeah, it was awesome. I thought the best part of it was when Calvin Thomas, the backup running back, was fake playing the saxophone.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And there were like 4 linemen that never played at all, like special teams guys that were standing in the back just doing like
just
the
kinda
white man overbite dance.
Around.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Who was the best player on the Bears team not to be a part of that? Do we remember?
That is a great question. Was Wilbur Marshall in it?
I don't think Wilbur Marshall was in it. I don't think Dan Hampton was
Hampton
in it.
was definitely not in it. That's correct.
Was the late Steve McMichael?
McMichael was not in it either. That's correct.
I don't think so. He was in it.
I mean,
and they had a lot of stuff going on if you watch that 30 for 30 too, with not liking the fridge and loving Buddy Ryan, not liking Mike Ditka. There was like a divide between offense and defense with that particular team.
I mean, that
There's
was
a reason why they couldn't
phenomenon.
win multiple Super Bowls or challenge for multiple Super Bowls because they were pretty much rotten on the inside out back then.
What's on the big show today, John?
We're going to get started. High school football later on tonight. And Bob Lovell joins us. Hashtag Ask Pat. Don Fisher, voice of the Hoosiers, not too far away from the start of their season. And who else? Tom Dienhart, I think. A little Boilermaker side of things coming up here with Tommy D. But, yeah, Sears and Roebuck, the NFL brand, when they made those, those are the absolute best. Nothing has ever been as good as that activewear.
It was awesome. I mean, everything about it was awesome.
Yes.
And every kid our age, like in the wintertime when you see them, we're all wearing the hat with the little snowball on the top.
Oh, that's great.
The gloves.
And you know what? I was just a Bears guy, but can you imagine if you had the Seahawks gear from that era? How cool that would be.
The best.
Oh, man,
that's why I've always kind of had like this weird affinity for the Seahawks just because of nostalgia of how awesome those colors were back in the Steve Largent, Jim Zorn era.
Jim Zorn, Steve Largent, activewear. It'd be
Kurt
great.
Warner with the C.
Yes.
All right, John's up next. We will be back with you on Monday, obviously, at noon. And I thank you for listening to Query & Company.